Good morning. Welcome to the Beghou CGT podcast series on cell and gene therapies. And we have done the earlier series with the pharma folks, but today we have the pleasure to have Mariana Weener, who is a researcher, physician at Broad Institute, a combination of MIT and Harvard. And we would love to hear physician views on what is going on, what could be meaningful. And today we have an ophthalmology angle to it. And to start with, Mariana, thank you. Thank you so much for coming over. So we want to look at what is working, what is not working in cell and gene therapies, and what do you consider success so far?
Yeah, the field is a hot topic these days, and there are more than 22,000 genes in human body. So in the next decade, gene and cell therapy field will be huge, and all the market prediction and from a physician perspective, patient prediction are huge because rare disorders are rare if they're of genetic origin, but combined together, they are not so rare, and it is 1 in 200 people who suffers from one or another genetic condition. So I cannot talk about all genetic disorders and the treatments because I come from ophthalmology field. So I would like to focus more on that, but having some kind of comparison of the systemic disorders and systemic gene therapy treatment and what is different in ophthalmology gene therapy. So eye disorders were treated one of the first with gene therapy because eye is isolated, small organ, and the drug itself is not needed in abundance. It's like 2 micrograms are enough for the eye, and you have to have much more for the nervous system treatment or for entire muscular system treatment. So this is one thing. And another thing is a very accessible route of administration and evaluation before and after the treatment. Because in ophthalmology, you can easily access eye fundus, non-invasive, in a very precise way. You can check on a cellular level which photoreceptor is preserved before and after treatment and which experience difficulty. So there are more than 300 treatments for ophthalmology genetic disorders on the way. But still, after 9 years of approval, Luxturna, first drug of gene therapy, which was approved in eye field, was in 2017, and there is no second Luxturna approved these days yet. Maybe there are some details to that added that some drugs are already approved for compassionate usage only or in a very limited group of patients. So we are on the way there. Back in 2017, we witnessed Luxturna as a huge milestone and as a miraculous treatment at that time because it showed both safety and efficacy, improving vision in kids who were suffering from the very heavy blindness from the born, inherited from the early childhood. And that treatment helped them to adapt and navigate in nighttime, dim light, tremendously. Patient observed a real change in vision, which was a challenge in other gene therapy developments because, let's say, for Usher syndrome, which is hearing loss and visual loss, it is not so obvious because the person is born not blind. The person is born with good vision. And in the first or second decade of age, the vision and hearing starts to deteriorate. And it is very important to measure efficacy of with treatment and without treatment. And the change in 3 years with or without treatment can be so subtle that it is not enough for the regulator to approve it, even if it is safe.
So what I'm hearing you say is Luxturna was a success. There have not been too many other Luxturnas, but the fundamentals around eye of how you measure different things before and after is there, but some of the changes have to happen on the regulator side as well, from understanding that the changes may be subtle and they may not be looking at that way. So maybe they need to have a different lens to ophthalmology compared to oncology, compared to neurology. And I think that's kind of what I'm thinking about. Now, when you think from this perspective, how do you make it successful? Like, what are the different interactions of stakeholders? I know you alluded to that, but what are the different interactions with different stakeholders that are required? And one of the things that I'm also thinking about is there has to be high clinical unmet need, and the standard of care probably is not there. And whatever research went in with Luxturna, with Dr. Bennett and others, it just shows to proves that things can work if done the right way, identified unmet need.
Gene therapy itself is a huge team effort worldwide because diseases are scattered worldwide. And we are lucky enough to have this field developed enough with infrastructure so we know every single player, at least who and what expertise is needed to make this treatment come true and approved, because we did not know that 20 years ago. And it started to develop like 25 years ago, not so long ago. So there are key players who are patients, and their voices are extremely important, and their activity and engagement is crucial in physicians, researchers, and pharma to look in their way. Patients must consolidate and have a voice to inspire all the rest team players for treatment development. This is one thing, very important. Second group is physicians who take care of those patients, who see their struggles, who can measure the first medical exam data in a year, in 2 years, 5 years after that. And not even 5, but 10, 20. So it's a lifelong observation. The physicians are also very important voices to advocate for patients on a professional level. And there should be centers of excellence, be it ophthalmology, ENT, or neurology, or some muscular disease centers, because the excellence of observing such patients is required. So you have to have enough cohort of patients to take care of, to make sure you have enough statistical power in your data. This is the second team member. Third is researchers who develop treatments. And this is an entire different world, which is amazingly inspiring for me, because these people have incredible creativity, and they usually don't know even the ultimate influence and ripple effect of what they do. But they are people who, in my opinion, must meet the patient community to see that, oh, we are working for these people, for this group of people.
Stakeholders.
Yes. So this is the third group. It's mostly business side, which is investors, marketing, and all lawyers, of course, and all the support which is needed from that side. And talking about lawyers, it's extremely sensitive field because genomic data is super personalized. So it's very hard to treat the patient without knowing his mutation, but it is very important not to share this information with the parties because data leakage and all these.
So the regulations and data privacy and all those things have to be taken into account, as well as maybe there need to be innovations and movement around that space.
Sure.
When you think about patient advocacy groups, where do you think they fall in?
I witness very good positive trends in this field. And of course, most of them are taking place in countries which are already with good infrastructure for that. Also with citizen rights and civil rights for people, legal paperwork administered already. But what we see is active groups of patients who get to know each other and who form into friendships and groups and share experiences, which is very important to support each other. And patient advocacy group is already almost a legal term needed to start treatment development. And in US, in EU, in Japan, there are huge advancements on that. But if you see the entire population on globe, there are so many voices that are still unheard in the populations with large number of people. And I forecast that 5 years from now, it will change. It must change because there are so many interesting and even curious statistics out there, which just becomes to be available to a broader audience and to physicians and researchers. Because it is one thing that you know that rhodopsin 23 ProHIS is the main cause of blindness in US, but it turns out it is such a tiny fraction because it is a US founder effect, rhodopsin mutation, which causes retinitis pigmentosa. And it is absolutely another frequency of mutation in other countries because it is still market. So the more the patient demand, the more possible people who will get treatment for a certain price, the more is market attractive. So when we need to know the market itself, and epidemiology data is not near there. So we have a lot of things to do there.
Sure, I think it's the collective union of all these different disparate patient groups and the advocacy and coming together and making one voice for these rare diseases and making sure the researchers, the pharma companies, the regulators, they're all working together. So now that gets me to the next point around science is advancing. There are possibilities and they're very unique possibilities. And it's very enticing to think about some of the diseases that can be cured or maybe managed. Now, when you think about the processes, the workflows, and the data, I think you alluded to a little bit there, but are these keeping pace with science?
So the short answer is no, not yet. Because sometimes when the drug is at the FDA and approval, it is already too old. And there are so many improvements on the way for this capsid, the cargo, which is the gene itself, or even the technology itself, CRISPR, prime editing, and some cell work. So, of course, we need huge improvements and acceleration in keeping up to date information, which also requires the inclusion of manufacturing chain of this huge teamwork, which is also crucial. And you are much more experienced in that. And I hope you agree with that. So, yes, regulator and legal paperwork and patient communities are not developed enough, and they don't keep up with the pace of science progression, which is, in my opinion, in this field, in this time point, is uneven. So science is getting quicker.
Yeah. So no, I think in our experience too, when we see across different clients, I think those things we see that. But I feel the clinical unmet need is so important versus the standard of care that exists today. Then thinking about how these therapies are going to bring to life in terms of clinical trials and the endpoints. What are those endpoints? You can't have the same way of looking at things as we had earlier. And then I think also the more, I would say, the whole idea of patient at the center, whether it's researchers knowing the patients that they're working for, the physicians knowing, or in the pharma companies, that gives you a whole ecosystem around that. And those are the changes that are required, like you talk about genomic data. I agree that's the huge, huge thing, but data privacy, these things can be taken care of. And there are ways where we can think about where patients are involved and we can have the guardrails to protect that. And then those are the things that I think are going to be important going forward. So when you look at the watch outs for the innovations that you think could be happening, are happening, may be happening in for these advanced therapies, what do you think? What are your final thoughts there?
Yeah. I would like to mention here the herd paradox, which we witness in investing when one relatively safe target is there. So all investors and pharma people are trying to develop treatment for one very rare form of hemophilia, for example. So there are 5 companies working in one tiny, tiny fraction of this field. So answering your question, we will keep facing the actions and the news on scientific advancements, which are backed up by the crowd following. So we have to know and understand science first, and we see an entire umbrella of instruments available now for the gene editing tools, not umbrella, but maybe the full bunch of options, starting from gene editing or gene augmentation. We don't have time enough to separate these in terms of this short podcast, but there is huge difference in the technology itself, which can be implemented in gene therapy. And this is the future. It is already there science-wise, but it is so far away from what a regulator can allow because there's still lack of data confirming that this is not only effective and promising, but safe. And this is where we need to build very solid foundation and brick by brick to form that clinical consortiums, patient, solidified voices heard worldwide with all kinds of mutations. And also I would advise people to look broader, not just heard in one specific aim, but there is like blue ocean strategy. We have enough of targets to develop and to follow up with clinical endpoints, different in every field. Neurology, one type of endpoints. Ophthalmology is another type. And for patients, I know it is very important to keep what they have, even if the drug is not effective, but helps them to preserve what they have. It's a huge milestone, which patients agree on, but regulator does not allow it because the price for the treatment is so high that there should be some miraculous effectiveness behind that price. And this is sometimes what we have a conflict on and much of debates, but this is an ongoing process. And I'm happy to witness that.
Yeah, means I think when I think about this, what you mentioned on watch outs, there's like it's a give and take in terms of how you're working through. And somehow, if it's a $2 million therapy, it looks like you have to cure everything. And that's kind of what is seen. But each, based on the conversation today, it looks like each therapy area has a different outlook and a different way of looking at things. And then also from processes and regulation perspective, they have to be different because the stakes are very different in ophthalmology to oncology, and the standard of care is also very different. And the big part that you mentioned was how you measure in eye the instruments and the everything that is there are very precise compared to other human body organs. So thank you, Mariana. Thank you so much for your time today. I think as we went through this, I think the way I think about this is Mariana said it nicely. The blue ocean strategy in terms of thinking about different targets, but also thinking about collective patient voices, collaborating together, thinking about different regulatory aspects and how we can improve, innovate. And I think that's going to be important, but there is hope and optimism. And I hope going forward, we will have a lot more Luxturnas. And thank you again. And till we meet again for
It's a
the
real pleasure to join
CGT,
you in this podcast.
yeah, CGT Beghou podcast series. Thank you.